All right, good afternoon. This is Melissa Buckley with TRC Energy Services. It's just noon, so I think we can get started at least with the go-to webinar information. If you can hear me, would you raise your hand on the go-to webinar toolbar? Thank you, Gabe. Okay, so it's working. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Just in the interest of time, this is likely your lunch hour. So, Melissa Buckley, TRC Energy Services. I'm here today on behalf of the PG&E Multifamily Upgrade Program, and we've put together this webinar for our program partners to go over some marketing best practices so that you hopefully are or can take away some tips to help bring in some additional business and help spread the word about multifamily upgrade. You might not know me. In fact, you likely don't. I actually was out for the majority of this year on maternity leave, but came back a few months ago and have been supporting the MUP team here at TRC with our marketing and outreach. So that's kind of my area of expertise and have worked across some of our other multifamily programs here at TRC. So first, I just want to talk about how to use GoToWebinar if you're not familiar with it. And let me just make sure, Gabe, I see your hand is still up. Do you have a question? I'm going to unmute you. Oh, your hand is down. Okay, great. You should all be muted for now. If you have a question while we're on the webinar, you can either submit it in the questions box, which is highlighted for you on your screen, or you can raise your hand and I should see it and we can get to your questions. Please make sure that you have entered your audio pin. It's not 97, but it should show for you in that box so that in the event that you have a question, you're ready to voice it when I unmute your line. So, welcome. First of all, we're going to talk about some fundamentals today for marketing to better position you so that you can grow your business and hopefully bring in some additional participation into multifamily upgrade program. First, we're going to talk about what marketing is and compare it to some more antiquated perceptions against what effective marketing really looks like. We'll talk also about how to market. You know, what do you need? What are the tools? Creating a plan, those types of things, scheduling campaigns, and we'll talk about some lead conversion tactics as well. At the end, we'll look at more strategies for attracting and converting leads. So let's start with what is marketing. Here are a couple basic definitions, both from the American Marketing Association and then from the good old dictionary. Basically, marketing is an activity or a process or approach through which you are promoting your service, your goods, etc., to the general public. Really, the end goal of marketing is to get your prospects to use whatever it is you are offering. When some people think of marketing, they get uncomfortable. You know, they think of the pushy salesperson that doesn't leave them alone. They think of the perpetual focus on closing the deal, relentless follow-up, and they get annoyed. You know, we all have an image in our head of a used car salesman, and typically that doesn't equate to warm and fuzzy feelings. So let's look at the new marketing. The most successful marketers are actually those that are good listeners. You know, you don't have to be pushy to be a good listener. You just have to shut your mouth. A good salesperson is not annoying or berating, but rather they're someone that's a resource for a prospect. They're someone that's trustworthy and they really put the prospect's needs first. These are all really important attributes, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to embody these attributes a little later. So let's kind of dive in and shift on to the how-to of marketing. So how do we market? The first thing really is to establish a plan, and it doesn't need to be fancy or complicated. It can serve really as your touchstone for marketing efforts, and the purpose is to help you organize your knowledge into something that you can act on. And on this slide, we've identified some basic pieces that you'll want to include in your marketing plan: the potential prospects, lead sources, marketing campaigns and messaging, and lead generation and conversion strategies. We'll go through each of these throughout the presentation, but before we do, I also want to encourage you to include some kind of follow-up process and way to measure success in your marketing plan. And that might seem a little backwards or out of place, but otherwise, how will you know what to do again if you don't know which effort brought in the most leads or projects? So it's really important that you include that assessment piece so that you can best follow up on your success. And again, try to think of your marketing plan as something that you'll use throughout the entire process, from the lead all the way to project completion. So you've got to make sure that you've got a mechanism to capture those successes and use to your advantage to generate even more business. So let's get on to marketing campaigns. Here's some potential marketing campaigns that you can incorporate into your plans. The first is email. We see a lot of this in this day and age, obviously. Emails can be general messaging or have targeted messaging depending on what you're trying to do. So a good rule of thumb with an email campaign is always to include some call to action. Read this article, or check out this case study, or complete the survey, whatever it is, to keep the prospect moving through the content. You want some kind of dynamic portion of your email so that they continue to keep scrolling or clicking or whatever it is, so that they're not static. It keeps them more engaged as well. Event marketing is another campaign that you could include, and typically refers to hosting an event to get prospects in the door, then using portions of that event to highlight whatever it is you're trying to bring to them, whether it's a service or product, or in this case, the program. A lot of programs similar to Multifamily Upgrade do this, and it can be very successful. We see it a lot through home or property tours, especially in the efficiency market. Social media, it's here to stay. We can't escape it. So it's pretty big, as you probably know, and it can really be a great way to demonstrate that you are a relevant resource for your prospects by posting timely and pertinent content. And on the flip side, we'll talk about this too a little bit later, you can use social media to check out, what's going on with your prospect, what's trending and what's important to them. So by following them, you can get a sense of those things. Of course, there's still tried and true methods, direct mail and telemarketing or cold calls. Sometimes, especially in this electronic age, these two efforts can actually yield the most results because they stand out more, and sometimes they can actually feel more personal. Just like with emailing, you can use direct mail for general or targeted messaging, and it provides, as I mentioned, a really great way to personalize your outreach. You can actually send a physical copy of an article that could be relevant to a prospect, or give them some other piece of information that you might not be able to transfer through an email. So, don't lose sight of those kind of old school methods of marketing, because, as I mentioned, they can be very effective. So let's dive a little bit into lead generation and the nurturing process. And then we'll get to some targeted messaging for use in these processes, how you want to develop that. So before looking at sources, let's talk about how to attract leads. It's important that you equip yourself with knowledge about your prospect's industry or industries. This only not positions you to, look knowledgeable about the subject, but it'll help you identify what really matters to your prospects so that you can appeal to their values throughout your marketing process. The best way to do this is really to do some homework. Start doing some research if you haven't already. Check out the publications that they read. So let's say you're targeting maybe affordable housing. There's Affordable Housing Finance is a great newsletter to see, what is important and kind of trending with affordable housing developers. Or consider taking a peek at their industries association newsletter like that offered through the National Apartment Association. The National Apartment Association has a number of affiliate chapters, smaller local chapters throughout California, so that could be another great resource for you. And as I mentioned before, you can also look at things like their LinkedIn profile, see what's trending, what they're posting about. A lot of these sources can also give you insight into maybe their top resident issues. That's something that can come into play when you're creating your marketing plan, which we'll talk about a little bit. And again, the idea here is to clue yourself in about what really matters to them. So all of these things will help you target your messaging so it appeals to what's relevant and positions you to have a good conversation with them when the time comes. If you do your research and you hone in on these things, you're better positioning yourself to build rapport and trust with your prospect. So here's some potential lead sources. This is not, an exhaustive list by any means, but hopefully will give you a good start if you're looking to take some of these first steps. So the first really is lists. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some are free and some are not. And if you have time and budget, it might be worth purchasing lists of multifamily properties, from one of these sources, combing through it to hone in on some targeted prospects. You can usually get some useful information from them in addition to just the contact information about the actual property, like the year built, the unit size, housing type, whether it's affordable or market rate, and in some instances, whether it's a specific resident populations, like a senior property. The next lead source for you to consider would be industry associations. Some of you may already be part of these industry associations, and I salute you for that. One thing that I've heard in my time here with TRC from property managers and owners is that they only do business with the people or the vendors that they know, and that one of the best ways that they get to know them is through these types of associations. The thing that can be challenging is this approach can take a lot of time. You need to be committed to getting involved with that particular association, putting in the time to build the relationships, going to the events, serving on the committees, that type of thing. But as soon as you get your first project from this lead source, you may find that the word spreads more quickly. So it can really be worth that investment. And some association memberships provide you with a membership directory, which is another great list of potential leads for you to comb through. The next lead source would be grouped under, data mining and research. As far as researching beyond some of the other sources I've mentioned, your field best, so try to tap into what's relevant. And really just sometimes Google can be the best way to start. Don't forget also about those that you've worked with in the past. Your previous customers can be some of your greatest resources. Ask them for a referral or a recommendation. See if you can get a quote. Get them to participate again. Keep that conversation open and flowing, and you never know when they may have another opportunity or know somebody who does. So now that we've touched a little bit on how to generate leads or the potential sources that you would be looking at, let's talk about what do you do with them? So maybe you've got your list now of 10 or 50 that you want to reach out to. It's time to start lead nurturing. So lead nurturing essentially refers to the marketing process that you will use to seal the deal or to convert a lead into a project or a customer. And it's important to understand the phases that go along with this process and understand kind of how a lead travels through from awareness all the way to conversion. So as I just mentioned, the first phase really in lead nurturing is awareness. This refers to the state when the lead is just meeting your product or service, or in this case, maybe the program, for the very first time. And the goal of this phase is to make the lead aware, make them aware of what you're offering. You can accomplish this through pretty much all of the marketing campaigns that we just identified: email, events, phone calls, direct mail, what have you. If you can, try to position your introductory marketing campaign to include a call to action. So remember I talked about how it is really helpful in email campaigns to include something to keep the lead moving through the content. So an email might say, complete this 3-question survey to learn more about our service. Or maybe at an in-person event, if you're doing event marketing, you can ask people to fill out a very short information form before telling them about this or that. When we've exhibited at various industry events, we often ask for an interest form before we either provide additional information on the program or provide them with whatever interesting item we have to give away. That way, you not only keep the prospect moving through the material, as I mentioned, but you get useful data that is important for the next step of the process. So you're kind of using this first awareness step as your foundation to build upon to get into consideration. So in the consideration phase is when you begin implementing your targeted messaging and your regular follow-up. So here's where you will use that information from awareness that you found out to kind of target your campaigns a little bit more. So again, say you found out that they are an affordable housing developer, you would want to tailor your messages accordingly. Or if their resident population primarily consists of millennials, that's an important thing to know and can help you make sure that you're providing information that's relevant to them. In the consideration phase, you'll also likely implement more regular follow-up, because this is when your lead is, as the name states, considering, whether they want to commit to what you're offering. It's crucial that you don't lose touch here. So you don't want to email them and just say, what have you decided? What do you think? Are you going to enroll, or are you going to use this product, or what have you? Instead, try to be that resource. Send them a link to something that you came across that you thought they might want to know about. Share a case study or offer to show them about your services in addition to just telling them. Maybe you can meet them at a property. Maybe they missed the event marketing opportunity, and you have the time to create a bit more of an individual offering for them. Go that extra mile to really show them about your services so that hopefully you can get them to the conversion phase. So this is the end goal. This is when you have successfully converted the lead into a project or a participant. It's really important to remember here that your job isn't over just because you got them to say yes. That's great. There's more work that you can do, though, to keep things moving forward. Collect testimonials here. Get referrals to their network. Maybe if you're at an event together, ask them to introduce you to somebody. Entice them to be a repeat customer. Keep that communication and relationship going. So let's talk a little bit now about what these kind of lead nurturing processes might actually look like. So you'll want to establish some basic efforts and timelines ahead of time so that you can plug a lead into the process pretty easily. You don't want to position yourself to have to decide midstream if they should get an email or a phone call, and and when. The goal here is that your follow-up is easy and purposeful, so that when you've got that lead and you're working to get them into that conversion phase, you don't really have to creatively think about what that is. You've already established that process ahead of time. So I'm going to show you an example of how you might kind of treat leads to get them to the end goal. So this outlines, like I said, how you might approach each type of lead. We like to classify leads into categories. Cold leads generally don't know anything about what you're offering. Warm leads might know a little bit and could have the potential to convert, and whereas hot leads are usually very knowledgeable and require immediate action. So we use these categories, cold, warm, hot, to kind of define how we want to follow up with them. So as I said, cold leads don't really know anything about what you're offering, so they will likely do fine with some general messaging. A cold lead is really where you're going to be building that awareness. Warm leads could have the potential to convert faster than a cold lead, so more personal follow-up can push them further along. So first they're going to get that same treatment as the cold lead with maybe general messaging or communication, but then you're going to pick up the phone and say, hey, I just want to make sure you got the email about this, that, or the other. Give them a little extra to keep them propelling forward. Hot leads, as I mentioned, they're ready to go. This is when maybe you're at an event, you're working with a developer for a couple different projects, and they say, hey, I've got this colleague in such and such company over here, and they were telling me about a project. I think that they would be a great fit for you. You go over and they introduce you, and this is an example of where you would want some immediate treatment. You want to follow up with them after you meet them to get a meeting or a phone call as quick as you can, so that you can qualify them and hopefully convert them into a participant. If leads drop out for whatever reason, they don't qualify or convert, basically you return them back to the cold lead status, and then they can fall back into your regular messaging. So once you identify the way that you want to follow up with each lead, try to identify timelines. It's nice to give folks a week or so to respond to a communication, and it's also nice to follow up on general efforts with a personal touch, as I mentioned before. Sticking to the timelines that you establish will help you manage your follow-up and act quickly to convert leads. So the other thing that you'll want to put together is some kind of system to track this lead nurturing. And if you don't have a customer relations management system or database, Excel spreadsheets work just fine. So you want to make sure that you are tracking the basic lead name and contact information. Also the source. This will also help you identify later on which of your campaigns were most effective. So make sure that that lead source is in there. You can also include the campaign that they participated in, whether they got an email or a phone call or attended an event, what have you. And finally, leave a space to have some kind of communication log. Here's where you would note any specific items for follow-up or any successes, so you can come back to those for your referrals. So I just want to show you a quick example of what this could look like in Excel. We've got the contact name, the company, their address, phone number and email, where the lead came from, if they've received any of our additional campaigns, what the latest communication is, if there's been any past success, maybe they participated in a previous program, and then additional items for follow-up. That's kind of where you're noting what your next step is. So on to targeted messaging. The first step when targeting your messaging is really to identify different segments. You'll need to do this so that you can appeal to each segment's values. So we've done this with our multifamily upgrade program email blasts, which I'll talk about in a minute, and you should be receiving. The key here in targeted messaging is that you're providing content that's useful and relevant to them, and you're also using the information you have gathered from earlier phases in the process to dictate that messaging. So remember I mentioned, maybe you find out that their resident base is primarily millennials, or they want to attract more millennials. Well, we had a campaign earlier this year that was all about the millennial generation that is demanding energy efficient living spaces. So knowing what their prospective resident looks like or understanding what's important to them can be really helpful. So as I mentioned, one of our campaigns earlier this year highlighted millennials and provided insight on why millennial renters matter and how to appeal to them. Another one that I've highlighted here focuses on benchmarking and gives some tips for you as a partner for how you can use benchmarking as a sales tool. In both instances, you could repurpose this information. Hopefully it's coming to you, and you can use it to help make the case for energy upgrade to your clients. So for example, do you have a client that's particularly concerned with staying current and would like to increase marketability and appeal to that young influx of renters? Or do you have another client that maybe worries about how their property compares to others, and benchmarking might be a really good tool for them? Think about that, and we're developing these email articles with these types of considerations in mind so that hopefully you can use the content to appeal to your clients' values and address their problems. So that's something I want to talk about now, is how to have that really effective marketing conversation. So once you have your prospects sitting in front of you, first of all, congratulations, because a meeting can be tough to get. Your lead generation has worked, and now what do you do? First and foremost, we need to remember that we are people. So we need to appeal to those human qualities, and you want to make your prospect feel comfortable. One of the best ways to generate and nurture leads is to be a credible and trustworthy resource. I think I've probably said that 5 times already. That is going to begin at the beginning. So set the stage right now when you're having that introductory meeting by allowing open dialogue and a questioning approach that resembles a conversation more than a sales pitch. And if you do this, you'll likely find out far more useful information and build better rapport with that prospect. So you don't want to begin by saying, here's why you need our product. Instead, you want to know, or at least allow them to talk about, help them tease out some issues. It doesn't hurt to ask about the family or the weekend either. So the best way for you to sell your product or service is to make it the solution to your prospect's problems. To do this, you have to anticipate kind of what those issues are, and be prepared to come up with a solution for each one that incorporates whatever it is you're trying to sell. In this case, multifamily upgrade. This isn't easy. It takes a lot of finesse to do this, and it means you have to do your homework. Get to know the industry and the players if you don't already. And on the next slide, we'll look at common problems to kind of help you see where we're going with that. So the next step then is be prepared to shape that conversation. And after you've made your prospect feel comfortable, you'll want to start asking really pointed questions to help expose what those biggest issues or problems are, so that you can hopefully help find a solution for them. So this last point, I think if you took any away from this slide, this one would be the most important. Listen. This is the hardest part. When you start asking those questions, you have to listen. Yeah, I mean, you have to close your mouth and stop talking and just listen to what they're saying. One good tip, especially for in-person meetings, which is what you hope to have, is to always have a glass of water with you at every meeting. So after you ask your first question, take a sip of water. That gives you something to do. You're not awkwardly sitting there in silence. It buys you a few seconds when you're too busy to say anything to interfere. This really lets the prospect share an unfiltered answer, which in turn will help better in the long run help you more than if you try to throw out possible responses. So to have those marketing conversations be effective, you've got to shift your focus away from selling your product or service and kind of making it all about you to really making it all about the prospect. So engage them and promote and guide the conversation and listen. Sharing details about the program or the offering or your product are all important, and sometimes they can get really complex, and that piece of information can fit better later in your sales relationship. So try not to overwhelm them with the details of your product right out the gate. So let's talk now about how to shift the conversation from you to your prospect by looking at some questions. So these are the type of questions that you want to use to really guide the conversation. So instead of asking them, how big is your building and have you thought about upgrades, consider asking about the type of building, maybe the vintage, what's the neighborhood like? When was the last time the building was updated? What kind of condition is it in? Do they know if there are any energy challenges? You can also consider asking some financial questions. Sometimes they might not know these answers, and this is where you could be a really great resource if you do. See if they know what percentage of their operating costs go towards energy payments. If they don't, maybe you can offer to help them figure it out so that you can show them how much they can save. Ask what their occupancy rate is like. Is it low? Maybe there's a maybe there's an opportunity to help them see how a more comfortable dwelling unit can increase lease-up rates and bring in more rental income. And you can provide the reasoning or strategy about how they can achieve that through upgraded windows and maybe central systems. Get to know their residents. What does a typical resident look like? Is it that downsizing boomer? Do they have only seniors living there? Is it a mix of everything? Who are they trying to market to? What are their biggest resident complaints? And another thing here is you'll want to note their use of the word resident or tenant. We hear both. In my experience, I see resident used far more frequently in this industry, but that could vary. So just be sensitive to make sure that you're speaking their language. So how to address some of these issues. So maybe they're losing money to energy inefficiency. Maybe they were able to answer the question about how much of their operating budget goes towards energy costs. And many owners or managers might not realize how much of a problem inefficiency can be, or know that they've got some inefficient systems but don't know how to address it. This is where you can really help. You can reveal where the money pit is, what isn't functioning well, and what they can do to fix it. Owners and managers are always looking for ways to keep their doors full, because that's how they make money in an income property. To do this, they've got to stand out from their competition, and you can help with that. Energy efficiency, as you know, can impact comfort. Keep it cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter, increase affordability, better management of resident utility bills, and even appeal to the increasing trend in sustainability awareness that we're seeing more and more. So that that's some of the ways that you can use energy efficiency to make the case of attracting or keeping quality residents. Owners and managers, have enough to worry about without having to track building regulations or green requirements that may accompany an upgrade like a minor retrofit. So that's where your expertise can come in to really help them navigate through code or other applicable green requirements. Older buildings, as you might know from your experience, can present a whole host of problems, especially regarding ongoing maintenance and repair costs. By helping them understand how much those costs eat into their operating budgets, you can make the case for upgrades and really show them how a retrofit can help save in the long run. So be sure to familiarize yourself with these types of issues ahead of time, ahead of that meeting or ahead of that conversation, so you're well positioned to present energy efficiency or the multifamily upgrade program and your services as a solution. So let's review a little bit what we've talked about, and then we can take some questions. So first, take the guesswork out. Establish a plan ahead of time that really lays out a path for you to simply follow so you can focus on building relationships instead of worrying about whether to send paper flyer or email. Build those relationships. Be resourceful and relevant. We are people, and people do business not because of what you do, but how you do it. So make sure that you're doing it the right way. Set targets and channels for each of your leads to follow. Again, take the guesswork out of it and provide regular, intentional follow-up. This is a great opportunity, through your lead nurturing, to show them and give them a preview of the great customer service they'll get by working with you on a real project. So don't overlook this opportunity to give them that great service. And remember, listen. Everyone likes to be heard. Give them a shot. Give them their opportunity for a soapbox, and really appeal to that personal aspect. So I hope that this was helpful and has given you some ideas to try out, for your own marketing. I'm happy to open the floor for questions. I'll put up my contact information here in the event that you would like to follow up with me directly. But if there are any questions, feel free to write into the questions box or raise a hand, or if you have a particular project that you're working on that maybe you want to talk through, we could do that. Feel free. I think I unmuted you, Michael. Can you hear? Can you speak?
Oh, I didn't know this was a two-way. Is this a two-way?
Yes. So I see you raised your hand. Did you just raise your hand?
Yes, I did. I was ready to type it in. Okay. So my question is, have you found a good way to get from the on-site property manager to the owner, whether it be an individual or a group of individuals?
That's a great question. So that's a really good question, and it's important. I didn't mention that you've eventually got to get to that decision maker, right? Who happens to be the owner or group of owners. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can ask, if say your meeting is with the property manager, right? You can ask, who's responsible for X, Y, or Z? Who's responsible for, making the decisions about, let's go back to finances, for example, about the operating budget and maybe where to invest in capital improvements. It's likely never the property manager, right? It's usually the owner or some group of owners or owner's representative. So if you can position yourself to provide that person, that decision maker, with information that's crucial to what, to something that they're doing, then I think you're going to be able to get to that owner more directly. So, the property manager might not, unless they're really engaged, which is hard to find, might not know, what the biggest expense is for the owner. So if you can somehow, position your information or your product to appeal to what, might catch their eye, that owner's eye, I think you have a better chance of getting to them. Oftentimes we do just have to rely on the property manager to take the information back. But if you could at least get the owner's name, maybe there's a way that you can start to build a relationship that way. So that was a long answer to kind of a short question. It's going to be different, I think, in every case, really.
I've talked to many property managers, and it seems their main concern is just solving arguments amongst the tenants and, fixing this and fixing that. And it's been pretty disappointing. That's why I asked if you had found a good way to get to.
Well, I think that, if that's what they're reporting, if they're saying, if they say to you, I don't have time for this. I've got X tenant over here who won't do this or that, or is complaining about this or that, or whatever the case may be. Pull that thread a little bit and say, is this common? Does this, whatever the situation is, does this happen a lot? Is this your biggest tenant complaint? And I bet you, and we can even talk about this if you have, a project that you want to kind of go back and look at. You've got my email, but we can talk about this as time goes on. Pull that thread and see what the real complaint is, and how can we position MUP or the other service that you're providing to help be a solution to that. So maybe they're complaining because, I don't know, the water's always running or something's not working well in their unit. Well, that might be indicative of a larger problem that maybe the owner doesn't even know about. But if you kind of explore and dig a little bit, of course, there's a fine balance between being helpful and being, too intrusive. You might be able to provide them with a solution, that says, I see that this is going on, or it seems like this is a common pattern. Have you thought about XYZ? So if you are interested in that, Michael, and you want to kind of explore if there's a property manager that might be willing to have a longer conversation with you about that, then you and I can talk and kind of talk through it and see how we could possibly approach it.
Yeah, sure. As I understand that the PG&E program, to qualify, you need to have at least 2 upgrade measures. Is that correct, or is it 3?
Yes.
It's 2.
I think it's one in 2 different categories, and they categorize it by systems, envelope, I think lighting and appliances. So they would have to have some combination across.
Yeah. Of 2, though.
Right. 2 categories, yeah. I believe it is.
I think that's one obstacle for a lot of owners is they're hesitant to invest the large amount of money required for a project that involves several upgrades. And but if it's just 2, that's not too many. I know the program down south, I think, is still requiring 3.
Yeah, I think it depends on the scope of work. I'll confirm that, and I have your email from the registration, and I'll send you some language to confirm that. But the other thing that we have worked on this year, because as you might know, last year, 2013 was the pilot, and then the 14-15 program year was like the first kind of more fully operational year, is allowing properties to take an incremental approach where they are implementing upgrades kind of over time. So maybe they're doing it like one category of upgrades at a time, or maybe they're doing like this building and then that building. That gives the intent is that it gives the owner more flexibility, so they're not as impacted in their cash flow, maybe because they don't have to pay for everything up front, or they've got a certain pattern to how their residents are in and out, so it's better for that. So maybe I'll see. I'll make a note. Are you going to attend? Are you attending the partner meeting?
Is that currently part of the program then, this incremental approach?
It's being piloted in this first year. Are you attending the partner meeting in November?
In Sacramento?
Yes.
I don't believe I'm going to drive up there, no.
No. Okay. Where are you located?
Visalia.
Oh, that's kind of a haul. Yeah. Because I think they're going to reflect on it a little bit. And Gabe, I know you have a question, and we'll get to you. Um,
Okay,
okay. Well, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'll send you some information. I'll send you a follow-up email in the next week or so,
sure, thank you.
touching on some of these things. Sure. Okay, Gabe, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
My question was mostly about getting lists, and it's not just where to get lists, but also how to approach using those lists best without, without kind of overwhelming and potential customers with unsolicited kind of
Yeah.
information. And,
Information.
yeah, so I mean, because I think I see some value there, but it just seems very touchy too. So just wondering if
It
you had any
absolutely is.
advice.
Yeah. So I can tell you one thing that we've done for another program.
Okay.
So things like lists and like cold calls and stuff like that. A lot of times what makes it difficult is that you don't have an in, right? So you don't. So you're making this call to somebody whose number you got off of a spreadsheet, right? And it's kind of awkward. And how do you get them to not hang up on you? Um, and so one thing that we've done is like there's county tax assessor lists um, that we've gotten for San Diego County, and we've kind of combed through the list to target like a particular segment. Like maybe we knew that, and this is an example um, just for discussion purposes, maybe we knew that through the associations we were reaching properties of a certain size, but we weren't reaching, X property that met whatever other criteria was that we were looking for. So we use that county assessor list to get at least some information to reach out to those people and just send them a letter in the mail. And that way, then if we did some research online, and this is very labor intensive, but if we then did some research online to find a phone number, we could call and say, I just wanted to follow up. I sent a letter to so-and-so to share this opportunity. I wanted to make sure they received it. And you will have a lot of, no, they didn't, or I'll check and get back to you, and then nobody ever calls you back. But you will also have some conversations that come out of it. So, the more broad that list is and kind of the more general, I think the fewer leads you're going to get from it, because you have to, have all of those introductory conversations or efforts like a letter or something you have to get through all of that to get to your intended person or to somebody who's actually interested. Whereas, if you're building that awareness, right, to go back to the presentation through those efforts. Whereas if you have a list of folks that maybe more peripherally, like through an association or from a colleague or another network, maybe you don't have to build as much awareness, and there might be a little more trust there, where you can kind of get into the conversation more easily. But that's how we use lists. I mean, it's really more of that like broad sweeping, introduce them to the product approach. I don't think you're going to find a hot lead through a list.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay. Anything else I can answer? I appreciate you guys sticking with me through this. Okay. Well, the recording of the webinar and I believe the slides will be up on the website. Michael, I know you said you're in Visalia and it's kind of a long haul to go up to Sacramento for the partner meeting, but I really encourage both of you to attend if you can. I think it's going to be a really great opportunity to meet, with your colleagues that are serving the program as partners too, and then also get a chance to meet with the team, the staff at TRC that implement this program. So if you can take advantage of that, I would encourage you to do so. And then you have my phone number and my email if you have any additional questions, or if you have a scenario, that you want to kind of talk through more or just brainstorm, please feel free to reach out to me or any other MUP staff, and we can kind of keep the conversation going. So thanks for attending, and I hope you guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.